Francois and Sunette has been working on a blueprint that Francois developed for a while ago for the Mosselbay area. And then when we read the document, we felt there was such a lot of very good foundational truths in it. And our challenge right now is how do we, so this is just call it the first version of, as our narrative develops, how do we eventually take it to market, scale it, and that it's very understandable and doable for mostly everybody.
Thank you. I'm going to keep my video off just because my internet connection is fairly unstable at the moment. So I apologize for that. But yeah, so this is like Jasper said, it is very much the first draft. We are still developing a lot of language for this. And so we definitely value your feedback because we need to get it into a format that makes sense for people, that's easily digestible, but very importantly, that the rubber can meet the road in a very effective or efficient way. And so the focus is to bring a restoration blueprint to our communities. And that's kind of the heart behind the whole thing. We, at a later stage, can get into the details of how it came about, because the name of the blueprint itself is actually, it's about returning the inheritance to those who lost it. So it's a restoration protocol from the start. So I want to start off by just connecting what Jasper also did in his presentation. I think a lot of what we are saying, we're saying the same thing. Once we started talking, we realized that we're busy with the same thing. It is two different perspectives. The angle that I'm coming from is focused on reaching the same destination, but it's got a different language and a different perspective, and that's what we're trying to synchronize now and make it as digestible as possible. So I want you to keep this slide in mind as we go forward, because it is the 4 sectors that Jasper talks about that we want to draw into a efficient and effective community model so that the community functions as it was designed to be from a kingdom perspective, revealing the kingdom of heaven on earth. And so that's the whole focus of the blueprint. And so it comes down to the same principles and values in essence. So for those of you that have gone through the slides and that is familiar with Jasper's what's the word now? Presentation, sorry. It's the same values and identities that we are bringing into a version of a functioning process and organogram, if you want to make it that simple. And so that's what I'm trying to explain to you through this slideshow that I welded together in the last half an hour. So I hope it's going to work out. We're going to get going. So the questions is an important part because it helps us get to terms with what we are trying to achieve. And so what is the structure of the blueprint? What does the blueprint process or procedure look like? What are the identity and values of the blueprint? What is the community structure? What are the focus sectors of the blueprint? We call them the 8 pillars. And how will the community restore these focus sectors or points within their own sphere where they function? And so if we can answer these questions, it also allows you to get involved that this is the problems we're trying to solve, that when you give us feedback, it is in line with these thought processes. So let's start off with the structure. So the way Father explained the structure to us when we started writing the blueprint was the wheels within wheels from Ezekiel. And so it comes down to the structure of the blueprint can be envisioned as that of a molecule, because molecules, if you look at the picture at your top right, you will see that it is wheels within wheels. And so the main structure and focus is that when we get to the core principle of the kingdom that needs to be manifested on earth, it will be something that is a golden thread that draws through all of creation. So if we look at wheels within wheels, it starts at molecular level, but it's also true for personal, for family, and for community life. And so that's the whole process of the wheels within wheels, is that we become aware that there needs to be a core that allows for a balance of the orbiting spheres of life. So the electrons in this case are the orbiting parts. And so we need somebody that just sits in the middle, the core, and they need to ensure that the vision, the mission, the identities and values are installed within that space. And for our case study for tonight, we're going to talk about the community. And so within that space, they need to be absolutely anchored in the identity and values of who Father is, so that the rest of society can come into balance. And so that's the restoration function of it. And so that is what we're going to try and establish through this blueprint. Then we've got the procedure. The way Father explained the procedure to us was through the tabernacle. And so for our sake tonight, I just want to make the point that I'm going to go through this very lightly. I'm not going to go into any depth. So if you ask any questions, you're more than welcome to ask deeper questions. It is just for the sake of our time and to allow feedback space. So we will eventually draw up a document that has everything in depth, all the definitions, everything explained clearly. Okay, so let's get back to the procedure, which is the tabernacle. So if we look at the tabernacle design, we've got the Holy of Holies, the holy place or inner court, and the outer court, and then the whole of the community of Israel, the tribes, lived around this structure. And so I drew up a structure on your left just to show how it is 4 zones or sectors that we need to look at. And so the blueprint is the governmental procedure that is represented by this tabernacle. And this provides us with the principal steps required to function within the structure, which is the wheels within wheels. So this allows us to get the flow. How do we move within the structure that is the kingdom of heaven that needs to be made manifest on earth? And so the position of the Holy of Holies is where the bench of elders sit. And they, from a 3-strand cord perspective, the Trinity principle always needs to be 3 elders, 3 people that carry the identity and values for that community. And so they are responsible for clearly communicating this to the community and governing the environment to allow heaven to manifest on earth according to Father's plan. And so the holy place then, which is next to where the identity and values live, is where the management sits. And so that is represented of the point of feedback, planning, in partnership with a bench of elders. And so you will see that's the management level. And that's also where the focus areas live, the 8 pillars. And that's where the project planning and the budgeting and all of that takes place. And so that needs to come into alignment with the identity and the values before it goes into the outer court, which is where the trading floor is. And so the outer court is where all the actions, the trade, the sowing and reaping takes place. And so that is where our projects will live. It's where our stakeholders, and in Jasper's case, when he talks about the NRC and all the bodies that live around the NRC, that's where they come into play. It's where your tools and community meet up. And that's where you start making the vision and mission that Father gave us, the blueprint, it becomes a reality. So it's where the rubber starts meeting the road. And so as soon as the project materializes, it needs to be handed over as inheritance for our children's children, and it becomes the property and the stewardship of the tribes. And that's now the first slide we looked at, where all the community sectors come together and they actually steward and become the guardians of what was given to them. So this is a quick run over of what is happening. So just to run through the identity and values, it's a distilled version of what Jasper also said. So this is what we had before we spoke to Jasper, and when I went through his slides and all of that, I could see all the cross-threading and the golden thread that runs through everything and how it lines up. And so I've just put in what we discussed recently And it's because just to save time and to save space. So you can look at this. We can discuss this in more depth. But the identity is the seven uh, on the left. So it's rest, which is also always the center point. And then it's community, unity, life, freedom, restoration, and abundance that function within that characteristic of Yahweh. The heart principle or acronym, sorry, is the values just absolutely condensed into honor, accountability, responsibility, and transparency, which is how we function within the community. And so you can break that down. If you look at honor, it takes it's in the 10 commandments. Honor is the first one that reveals a blessing, but it takes absolute humility and the pursuit of intimacy to unlock honor. And so that's the way we need to pursue every community relationship, every community project. It's really to listen to where people are, where they are going, and how we can come alongside them, making them the best version that Father's created them to be. And so it's living from that place. Accountability, humility is once again, you are accountable for every action to Father and to the community. And you need to be teachable so that when you get feedback, that we are in a place where we want to fix things. We don't want to point fingers. We want to say, okay, this is the state of affairs. Let's take responsibility, or become accountable for where we are, and then take responsibility in fixing it. And that's where the next value comes in. And it's taking ownership. In a way that we build an inheritance for the next generation. So we're not only doing it for ourselves for the short term, we're always looking ahead 2 generations from now. And then the transparency is to communicate through systems and procedures and the structures that we build in such a way that we create a safe space, which is trust, and that the communication is healthy. Like within a body, if your nervous system communicates healthy, every part of the body functions effectively. And so that's kind of just a short overview of identity and values. And then the community structure. If we boil it down to very much basics, it's again the Trinity principle. If you look at yourself as a community structure, and this was the question that we asked Father, is how does the structure for the community look in terms of his design? And so he took me to the body, and he said, your body is spirit, soul, and body. I see my words are upside down there, so I need to fix that. And that is kind of the blueprint of how he designed us as individuals. If we then look at the community in a similar fashion, and we say, listen, okay, if the blueprint that Father has for the community has a spirit, soul, and a body element to it, which is which? And so the identity and values is the spirit side of it, and it's the core, it's the absolute starting point of everything. Then from there, if we look into the soul realm, it's the socioeconomic side, it's where the relationships within our community live. And then the economic side is where we see the sowing and reaping, where we see the fruit of us walking our identity and values with quality, intimate relationships. We reveal the fruits, which is our economic business structures. And so that is where the community then thrives, and it's a healthy model. And so the one can't go without the other if we want to be functional in the earthly realm. Like your body, spirit, soul, you can't live without your body to be functional in this dimension. And so if we look at the blueprint on the far right, it is the same. So the economy sits in the middle, and this is supposed to be the other way around. Sorry, I've got the wrong picture here. But so the identity and values is supposed to sit in the middle. Then we've got the social side and the economy on the outside. And so you live from the core values out into the blueprint of the community. And so that brings us to the blueprint itself, which is the restoration blueprint. And so the sectors of focus, this is what Father's given us. And so this is still under construction. We're still discussing this part of it. But just for the conversation's sake, if these are the 8 pillars that Father is saying we need to look at for restoration, you basically come as a community in a whole. your identity, your relationship side, and your economy side, and you say, okay, in 3 parts, we need to see where are we dysfunctional? Where are we lacking? What do we need to restore? Because this is the restoration blueprint. And so if we look at education, the education focus, if we put that glasses on, we can then say, okay, Father, reveal to us where in education in our community are we lacking, that we need to solve the problem. And then we can look at it from an identity values perspective. We can look at it from a relationship perspective, and then from a business economic perspective. And that's all things that can happen in parallel. You don't have to build in series, fix the first problem first before you can move on to the next. So this is the kind of the glasses you put on. And then from there you go forward and you solve that problem and fix your community into a model that reveals heaven on earth. So very simply, and this is something we are still working on, is figuring out how that physically is going to look. But so if we are the community, the town, and we say, okay, we've got our tools, which is something we are also now kind of the network of available resources and tools that is there for a community, which the NRC is one. The shared services side, that might also be part of the NRC's function. The governance side, those are the tools that we have to our that we have access to. And then when we partner up with the community and that tools, we can then look at one of the focus areas and we can bring it into a restored state, which is in this case education. And so that's a basic process flow. If we look at it from a organogram side, so if we go from this slide where you look at the 8 pillars that revolve around the community, and we say, okay, we're going to solve the problem for education now. The next step would be to figure out how that's going to flow. So that the organogram is a kind of a revelation revealing the tabernacle itself. So once again, let's go back to the tabernacle quickly, just to make it easy. If we look at the tabernacle picture, the Holy of Holies sits atop where the bench of elders live. The management position is where the holy place is, where we've got all the planning and the budgeting. Then we've got our stakeholders, which is where the projects happen. This is where your trading floor is, where the businesses get together. And then we've got our tribes. So keep that in mind when we look at the organogram. Once again, we start off. And so we say, okay, if we're going to solve the community's problems, we need a legal vehicle through which we're going to do it. And so that will be where we want to establish the CCC. But in order for us to do that, we need a bench of elders that will sit in that seat and that will govern the identity and values for that community. They will then, from there, flow into the different sectors of that community, which is then where the pillar bench will sit. So there is another layer of Holy of Holies that come on top here, because for each line of the focus areas, the pillars in that community, we have a focused bench of elders that sit above that that pillar. For instance, in our case, if we take education, education sits here. Now we want to solve the problem for education. We say, okay, we move into the holy place, which is then the project management level, which is the purple horizontal. Then if we fix everything within that purple layer, so now we're talking, we get the management team sorted out, we get our procedures, we get our budget, we get our project plan ready. They converse with the bench above them, which is the identity and value guys. From there, if they get the go-ahead, we then move into projects phase. That is where our stakeholders, our project contributors, all get together, and that is the blue horizontal. Then we do the project until completion, and during the final phases, we draw up the management and maintenance procedures and structures, which is then the guiding tools for the guardians or the community stewards, which is in the green horizontal, which is then the inheritance handover phase. And so as soon as we are finished with the project, they take over and they manage and steward it from there. And so to make it very simple, this is kind of a idealistic way of looking at for now. This is definitely going to change quite a bit, but just to get the idea, this is the flow process. So establishing a bench of elders for your town is the first step. And so as soon as we, and this is what Jasper is also saying, as soon as we get the right-hearted, right-minded people together, we can get that going. And so it always needs to be a minimum of 3 people. Then the step 2 is for them to be able to get the blueprint, the identity and values, the vision and mission for that community clearly verbalized so they can communicate it to the community. And within this step, the CCC is then established, which gives them the legal vehicle through which they can then have authority in that community and communicate. And so then it's their responsibility to go and network and identify the community project leaders, those who have skills, experience, maturity. And so this is the pioneering phase, and this is the initial startup community, if you can. It's kind of almost like the leaven, die suurdeeg starter. And so they will be the people that run this, and this is why it is establishing the pioneering group under 12 months. So we want to get that going as fast as possible so that we don't drag this process out, and that we get the people who really get the blueprint and who are serious about it to get invested. So then we move on to step 3, which is identifying the low-hanging fruit projects that will serve the community and the blueprint. So it is really looking at easy projects that is business and economically orientated, that will then also serve the community in a social manner, relationship manner, and serve the values and identities, which is kingdom. And so then we start establishing the pillar benches. So then we identify the people who will run the project. So if we just go back to this, if we look at this design, this is the CCC bench for the community. Under that town or community, there are the 8 pillars. As soon as you identify a project, you will know in what sector it falls. And for that sector, you then establish a bench that then governs that leg of the community's responsibility. So then step 4, we appoint the project management team for each project. It's the same as in the organogram, and then we start drawing up the project plan and budget. And so as soon as that is finalized, they then go back in step 5 to the bench that sits in that pillar, and then and so the project management team then confers with the bench of the blueprint for that pillar, and then the project is finalized. So the important things is that in this stage, step 5, they need to really be sure about the intent, the timeline, the budget, the partnerships that are going to be formed. Because if we start off the foundation in a way that is unhealthy, we are going to really struggle going forward. And so step 6 then is to establish the network of possible project contributors. And so it's your stakeholders, so it's the funding, it's the materials, the services, or everything that is needed for that project. And then identifying the contributors or stakeholders who align with the identity and values of the blueprint. And once again, this is the important bit, because if we start partnering with people who are not aligned, we are going to have uncommunicated expectations, and all of you that are in intimate relationships will know that that is a massive thing if that is not sorted out. And so that is what we want to clear up. And through this whole process, we will use procedures, we will use whatever legislative mechanisms we need to govern that as good as possible. And so step 7, we start and manage the project until completed. This includes creating all financial, legal, and maintenance systems and structures so that we can hand it over to the next generation of guardians. And so during step 7, we will also father the people into maturity who will then manage and steward the projects that becomes the inheritance or the property of the community. And so near completion, that is basically what I just said. We put the maintenance and management team in place, and we hand over the project to the guardians, which is then the tribes. And so that is my song. I think that is my final slide also. And so I hope this makes sense. I'm absolutely, as every time we work with this blueprint, I can feel the fear of the Lord come upon me. And so it makes me really humble and a little bit scared in a healthy way that we are busy with massive stuff.